What's good? GeoFuck Psych Perspectives. And I think it's important that we talk about this. Sexual assault and abuse. First of all, if you're on Twitter, you probably already know about this. But a 20-year-old black woman sexually molested, raped a 12-year-old black boy. And that black boy ended up contracting herpes from that 20-year-old black woman. And a lot of people have mixed views on it. In the video, you see the 12-year-old black boy's family members confronting the 21-year-old black woman who molested and raped him and gave him herpes. And it's two black women. One black woman is the one filming and talking, and another black woman comes in and suplexes the 20-year-old black woman that raped and molested and gave the boy herpes. And a lot of people are like, some people are like, well, if that was my son and he got him some pussy from a 20-year-old woman, I'm gonna be giving him dabs, my nigga. You got some pussy. And then other people are like, what the hell, nigga? That's child molestation. That's rape. He's a 12-year-old boy. He clearly cannot consent to that type of activity with a grown 20-year-old woman. On top of the fact that he contracted herpes because of this 20-year-old woman that molested and raped him. So I just want to talk about this because I feel like oftentimes, especially when it comes to masculine people, men, boys, they are victims of sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual harassment, and sexual violence too. And nobody really talks about that. And then going deeper, feminine people, women, girls can be sexual predators, abusers, harassers too. Sexual assault doesn't have a gender, doesn't have a sexuality, doesn't have a race. It doesn't discriminate. However, if we're going to speak in terms of statistics and numbers, statistically speaking, men are more likely to be the aggressors, women are more likely to be the victims. That is true. However, that's not always the case. And we also need to address the dynamics of sexual abuse, especially pertaining to masculine beings, because a lot of times there's this idea, well, he wanted it, or, well, he got some pussy from an older woman, he the man, he's 12. And now he has herpes. And herpes is an STD, a sexually transmitted disease. There's no cure for herpes. He's gonna have that for the rest of his life. Okay? He's gonna be on Valtrax and having to go to the hospital and the doctor to check up on if he has an outbreak or any of that for the rest of his life. And now that's an additional burden because he's going to have to inform all of his potential sexual partners in the future that, hey, I have herpes because I was molested and raped by a 21-year-old woman when I was 12. And that's some sick, perverted shit. And the fact that people are sitting up trying to joke about it and then bringing it to the black community is very important because a lot of sexual abuse and assault and harassment is swept under the rug in our communities. Okay, hence why the R. Kellys of the world are able to thrive for decades because it's often swept under the rug. Nobody really cares about the safety of a lot of our children in our communities, a lot of our people in our communities. And it got me thinking about a lot of masculine people and men and boys and people who are masculine and identify on that with that gender identity, and how a lot of people in our community come off as being, very sexual, very promiscuous, and very active sexually, but we don't really know the background. We don't really know if that is their true choice, if that was their autonomy or not, because a lot of times when people are introduced to sex before they're supposed to be introduced, or they're victimized and abused, and they go through sexual trauma, Some people will become extremely sexually active and promiscuous because that's how they cope. And then there's people like myself. I was sexually molested in the 3rd grade. I was 8 years old. I was sexually molested by a grown-ass man that lived next door for an entire year. And that pretty much turned me off from sex. Like, that's why I can say I'm 26. I'll be 27 in October, Lord willing. And I'm pretty much a virgin. I don't do shit. And no, I'm in therapy now. It took me years to get into therapy, which brings me to my next point. That 12-year-old boy, he needs to be in therapy. He needs to be in counseling. Because no telling what type of ramifications are going to come out of the sexual abuse that he had to endure from a 20-year-old woman who gave him herpes. Okay, so he needs to be in therapy and counseling. He needs all the love and support around him. Instead of sitting up talking about, oh yeah, bro, you got pussy, bro. You got a 20-year-old woman, bro. No. And then it's crazy how the dynamics change, because if that was a 12-year-old girl who had sex, who was raped and molested by a 20-year-old man who also gave her herpes, everybody would be up in arms talking about how wrong that is. Or they would be talking about how she wanted it. Because again, depending on who you're talking to and where their mindset is, their perspective could be rather horrible. So, you feel me? But the point is, it really makes you think, like, and especially like growing up for me after what I experienced and just seeing how a lot of the masculine people in my life, a lot of the men and boys and people who were masculine in my life kind of portrayed this, oh, well, we just out here getting it in. We just busting nuts. We just getting hoes. You know, we conquering our sexual conquest, when really a lot of these people were probably victims of sexual abuse. I'm just gonna be honest. And I think we need to talk about it more, because this is sickening and it ruins people's lives. I mean, your developmental stage, the trauma that you go through, the PTSD, you know, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, it's like, damn, I have to relive what I went through for the rest of my life while this sick, perverted man is walking around free doing him. Because once again, oftentimes when sexual abuse takes place, the victims, the survivors, we don't get any justice. Because a lot, like in my case, he didn't go to jail. There was no court. There was no charges pressed. I didn't even get a fucking physical checkup to make sure that I was okay physically, let alone mentally. It was brushed under the rug. And then you wonder why so many of us have so much hate and resentment and animosity towards the opposite sex, towards the opposite gender, or towards the same gender, same sex, depending on who did the abusing. That fucks with your mind, bro, mentally. So it's like, these are conversations that need to be discussed, and we need to be coming up with solutions to prevent this sick shit from happening to people in our communities, to our family members, to our friends, to our neighbors. I mean, damn. Anyways, me too, okay? Me too.